Greetings everybody. I am just going to do a real quick build video on Svenstrob's new BMS board in combination with the Deligreen Daly BMS. It's pretty straightforward, simple. If you've built one, you've built many others, I'm sure. You can take a look on the board and you'll notice that right there you've got the P minus, so you're always going to line up your negative. Now what I like to do is do a dry fit before I even cut my wires, which in this case I did this beforehand, just kind of save time. And what I mean by dry fit is I just clip the cable in there, set the BMS on there, and I cut my wires to length to get an idea of how long they're going to be. Now in my particular case, what I did is I brought them all the way to the edge of the board and cut them there. That way that gives me a little bit of extra length and makes it quite easy for having to remove or add the BMS module back in. And I also pre-tinned the wires. I don't know how well that's going to show up on the camera. Of course, I got to get it centered first. There you go. They're all tinned, so this makes it a lot easier on getting them lined up to go in through these tiny holes. So that's what I'm going to do first. And I recommend doing this part first because you get kind of cramped on space if you don't. And my eyes are not as good as they used to be. So bear with me while I get all this done. Oh look, I bent the wire over. Awesome. And yes, I'm having technical difficulties, so I'm trying to get this to go through. Just wearing the camera, I can't wear my magnifying glasses. There we go. Now I did go through and test fit all these, or at least I thought I did. There we go. Now one of the added benefits of pre-tinning the wires is I can come on the other side and add heat and they should just stick. Got the plug is actually holding the board up there, so I'm going to go ahead and solder all these into place. And you don't want to heat these up too much because the insulation on the other side will melt, and then you have exposed wire, and the least amount of exposed wire that you can get, the better, preferably none. And that's it for that particular cable. Now the next thing I recommend putting on is the header pin, and I don't know how well you can see it in the video, and of course I keep putting the board off the camera. There is a white box that goes around the pins, and you'll see right in the middle there's a little notch that indicates where the notch for the plug goes. So we're just going to line that up. Double check the back side. Everything's where it's supposed to be. And we can lay the board down, and what I'll do is do one dab of solder, straighten the board out, let that cool off, and then we go in and finish it off. I just spin the board around just to make life easier on myself. Sorry, I keep taking the camera off the board there. This is the most difficult part of this build, and it isn't that difficult. So now I'll add the XT90 connector. And if you notice on here, you got your two main power terminals, and then you got these two little extra things that just don't go anywhere. Those are just to support the plug, and it is important that you get those on there. Now I'm using a smaller tip than what I should be using for this particular part, so I'm going to use the solder to help heat up the area. Ideally, you would change the tip out at this point and use a larger tip. But like I said, I'm just using the solder to help get the heat to go through. And it don't take very long. But you do want to make sure you get a healthy amount of solder on there so that you get the best possible connection, since all of your power is going through this connection. Just like that. And now it's time to mount the BMS unit. Now this particular unit we set up so that the holes on the board line up with the screw holes. So I'm just going to take those out real quick, and I provide extra long screws to go through the board to be able to mount this. They will be included in the kit. M2 screw with a 2mm washer. Get the first one started. And once the first one started, it's easy to line up the rest of them. And there's a little bit of wiggle room on these screw holes, so just in case there's misalignment issues with the manufacturing process, there is room to make it work. And then we just snug them down. There's no need to torque these down, to bear down on them. You don't want to crack the board. You just get them snug and they will hold on just fine. Now if you're worried about them coming loose, you can put a drop of Loctite on there, but unless this is getting moved around a lot, which in a power wall it should not ever move, you can put some Loctite on there just to hold them down, give you that extra sense of security. Go through, make sure they're all snugged. Like I said, you don't want to go too tight, because if you go too tight you will crack this board. Now I do want to point out on here that if you notice where the screws are, you'll see this little square around. There is no metal around those squares. That is to ensure that you don't get a connection between your power feeds and the BMS board itself. So they are completely isolated, which just makes it nice. Now that that's part's done, I can plug in the balance lead, and it's a little clip on. And as you can see, the wires turned out quite nice and clean by cutting them to the edge like that. Now all we gotta do is our main power wires. Alright, now to prepare these, I like to strip them from about the edge of the board out, and because the wires are so tight, I leave all that on there when I do this part. I pull that all the way out like so, and I found this makes it a whole lot easier on trying to get this wire through the board. And hopefully this will work, and I'm not just going to be wasting my time trying to show you something. Now, with that being said, that pulled right through, just like I was hoping it was going to. And then this one, same thing, pulled right through, no problems whatsoever. That is the easy way of doing that. And then you just come along and trim it down. Of course, my cutters didn't cut clean. And now we add solder. Got the wide tip on here. And this part takes a minute or two because there is a lot of wire to get your solder through. So I just pull it up and let the heat do its thing. Like I said, it takes a minute. So don't get into a rush. Let it do its thing because you want to make sure you get good heat to make sure you get good connections all the way through. Okay, first one's done. Now to the second one. Adding my solder to give me more contact surface for the heat to transfer. And this is not a fast process, so don't try to rush it because you want to make sure you get a good solid connection here. This is where all your power is going. I like to make my way all the way around. Make sure I get good heat transfer. And there we go. Actually, I want a little more heat back here. I'm looking at that and I just don't like the way it looks. Okay, same thing over here. I'm going to add a little more solder to the back side just to make sure. Alright, let that cool for a second, then I'm going to come along and clean it up. And watch your eyes from this part, because as you can hear, that just went flying. Now that I've trimmed it down, this is just purely cosmetic. I go through and remelt the end. Like I said, this is just me. It's purely cosmetic. No other purpose. Now, we'll trim off all of our balance leads. Make sure nothing's touching anywhere and there's no scrap pieces of wire or solder in between anywhere. Everything looks good. This is now ready to be mounted into my power wall. And that's all there is to it. Hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope it helps some of you. Have a good afternoon or evening, whatever your case may be.